My name is Luke Alexson. I am a professor of art here at Biola, as well as the director of the Center for Christianity, Culture, and the Arts. Along with the School of Fine Arts and Communication, we are really pleased and proud to be hosting this forum this afternoon. And I wanted to thank Dean Todd Guy and the team at SOFAC for all of the work that has gone into this, Michael and Eric and everyone else, as well as David Baxter and everybody working on technology to divine all these miracles of modern technology and make this possible today. So the subject of our forum is obviously particularly poignant for our time. And we have, a myriad of overlapping crises that really need no introduction, so I won't belabor any of those for us here. But at the same time, here we are celebrating. We're in an incredibly beautiful chapel amidst a beautiful community. And we are part of a beautiful community that is built off of grace and love and a tradition that spreads back thousands of years that captures beauty and truth and goodness. And so we have this, this paradox and this tension that we live in continuously. The question remains, however, that even though this is the sort of state of human existence, we are still always asking this question, or at least I am, even though I've invested my life into art and into beauty. Why beauty? Why beauty? Why now? And especially as the sort of cacophony of suffering and pain increases around us, these questions tend to be raised. And when there is a sort of expediency or some sort of urgent need, that question comes up. Why beauty and why now? So we're going to answer these questions 100% in the next 2 hours or so. And these wonderful people to my right are going to be the ones to do that. Yeah. You're welcome. All right. Yeah, I should have mentioned that, but. Okay. Just to start things off here, I wanted to start with an image. This is from the Imperial War Museum in Britain, which is quite the institution in and of itself. This is an example. This is actually from World War I of what is called trench art, and maybe some of us have heard this term before. It's actually an artillery shell, which would be what is remaining of a shell after it is exploded. In the trenches, literally, some soldiers would actually make art out of what they could find. And this would be one of the most common things that was used by soldiers in World War I to make art. Literally in the trenches often. Not always, but sometimes. This particular example was made by a British soldier in the trenches. It was taken from a stencil, which he purchased from a Belgian soldier in exchange for 5 cigarettes, and then was transferred onto this shell using iodine, which was probably procured from a medic, and then was actually etched in with just a bent nail that he found somewhere. So this was done on the Western Front in France, and if you know your history, you know this is one of the most horrifying places and times in history to be, and just an absolutely catastrophic place, and a kind of a war that at the time was tragically called the War to End All Wars, or the Great War, was in fact obviously not. At the same time, everyone who was involved really felt that way, that this might be the end of everything. Most of the people that went to this front definitely felt like it was probably the end of their own lives. And when they said goodbye to their families, they assumed it would be for the last time. So this, again, raises our question. How do these things intermingle? Why this? Why this in the trenches? A story of a specific soldier I wanted to share really briefly here.
who did in fact say goodbye to his wife. He was 24 years old, goes to the trenches. He arrived just in time for the Battle of the Somme, which is one of the most terrible battles of this terrible war. And then the first day of that battle is to this day the most deadly in history of the British Empire, all of British military history, which is saying something. So this young soldier lost a couple of his dearest friends and didn't expect to live much longer himself. But at night, often by candlelight in the trenches with artillery fire, started to write fiction. And as he was recovering from a bout of trench fever, which was something that was happening constantly also, he started to write about this fantasy world and these wars between good and evil. And he ended up calling his fantasy world Middle-earth. So right in those trenches, one of our most beloved fantasy worlds was formed. And the image of Mordor was in fact not so much fantasy as it was a very direct transcription of J.R.R. Tolkien's experiences in the trenches. But at the same time, if we think of The Lord of the Rings, and we're familiar with that, we don't think of death and misery and hopelessness. We think of redemption and joy and beauty. And therein, again, lies that paradox. My last image here would be familiar to anyone in the world of psychology, maybe some outside of that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is a way of trying to describe what is most fundamental and important for a human being to be able to exist in the world. So at the very base level, we have our physiological needs that without we would not be around for very long, several days maybe. Food, water, warmth, and rest. Just above that, we have security and safety. So if you are a British soldier in the trenches, you don't get past first base here. You are right at that bottom. But if we look at the top of the pyramid, we see self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. So theoretically, art is right at that top there, and you get there after going through all these successive steps. And of course, we are seeing that that is not actually the case. And not just with this one example from World War I, but as partially our panelists will talk about today, throughout history and throughout cultures, this has always been true that art is not this place of self-actualization. It is something that happens on that base level, everywhere in the world throughout recorded history. So how do we reconcile this gap? And once again, bringing it back to our present moment, why beauty, why now? To begin this conversation, I'm going to introduce all of our panelists, and some of them have prepared introductory remarks, and so we will go through some of those, then we'll have a short break, and then we will come back and we'll have more of a conversation after that. So I'm going to start by introducing Roberta Ahmanson, who along with her husband Howard, and their passion for cultivating beauty, truth, and goodness in the world, are largely responsible for a lot of the beauty that we see around us today. That includes the stained glass windows, this incredible piece behind me right here, which I promise will be revealed a little bit later today, as well as this collection. For those of you who are familiar with the chapel, you might notice that there are some pieces hanging up around the space today, and these are a series of 15 Ethiopian icons that Howard and Roberta and the Fieldstead Foundation have generously loaned to us for this event today. So I'd strongly encourage everyone to spend a little bit of time with them, either at the break or after the event, and I think they really inform this conversation in some meaningful ways. So, back to Roberta. For many in the room, Roberta probably needs no introduction. She is an author, an explorer, philanthropist, a great friend of Biola. She has been a religion reporter, an art writer, art collector, focused on discovering the nature of reality, the role of religion, and the meaning of history and the arts. She has a BA from Calvin College and an MA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and is a powerful advocate and cultivator of beauty, and we are grateful to have her here today. So please join me in welcoming Roberta Ahmanson.
Thank you. The text I got said I could take my mask off when I talked. So I'm doing that. I'll put it back on. I also am fully vaccinated, and I am a survivor of COVID. So, but other than that, thank you, Alec, Luke. I want to call you Alec when that's your last name. That was very kind, and my husband's here, and he can give you the truth later. Except maybe I can talk him out of it. Anyway, it's really lovely to be in this chapel with all of you and to be a part of this very wonderful day when Biola dedicates and celebrates its new art building, Bardwell Hall, which is a great asset to the university. And anyway, it's just a great day. What I want to say is first of all, well, this place, let's just start with where we are. Many of you remember, some of you may not remember what this space was like 5 years ago. It was very different. It didn't look like this at all. Luke gives us credit, but I think we should also give a lot of credit to Paula Corey and Barry Corey, because Paula was part of a trip to Denmark where we saw what could happen in spaces that were dedicated to worship, but had been transformed so that the very space made you want to worship. You felt worshipful when you entered them. And we traveled with the artists, actually, who did the work in this space and who did the redesign of this space. Peter Brandis and Maya-Lisa Engelhardt. And the wall, which you can't see because of the screen. Allie, we've been to that rodeo, haven't we, with art that you can't see because of screens? Anyway, but I understand it's what you need to do for a lecture, but in this case. However, anyway, it gave Paula and Barry and also others who went on that trip a vision for what could happen in this space. And so we all worked together, and here we are in a transformed space. And I brought the person whose idea I want to talk about first, who is a Russian, who is a Byzantine scholar and the director of the Center for World Culture at Moscow State University, who talks about hierotopy, which is the creation of sacred spaces as an art form. He's very fussy and a little crotchety. Well, I don't know if crotchety is quite right, but he has high standards for those who've met him. At any rate.
Oh, I was just going to mention this is being recorded, so in case.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks. Okay, Alexei, you know I love you. Alexei, Alexei has high standards, and if he likes something, he tells you, and if he doesn't like it, he also tells you. So when he walked in here, I couldn't get him out. He sat right there where Chris Giamona is sitting for an hour, and he looked at me and he said, "Roberta, it is a monument. It is the most Byzantine-like sacred space that I have seen done by contemporary artists." So you're in a place that's been pronounced special by a person of standards, we'll put it that way. I don't think he'll be mad at me. And I couldn't get him out of here. And we were supposed to go to Los Angeles, and he just said, I am still meditating. Okay. The freeway awaits, Alexei. But the point is that one thing, beauty is, first of all, art is a language. It's visual language. It may or may not be beautiful. A lot of art is beautiful, but to be good art, it needs to tell the truth. It doesn't necessarily need to be beautiful. And I think this space is beautiful. And one way in which beauty operates, and one which Alexei writes and talks about, is the mediating image, which is what an icon is. It is an image which takes you beyond this world. It's unlike what Alexei calls Western art, religious art, he calls it religious pictures. They're teaching, but they aren't mediating. We can argue that point. But the point of an icon is that its beauty draws you in and draws you beyond and draws you closer to God. And the point of a sacred space is it's a space where you participate in the beauty. You aren't the observer looking at it. You're a participant in that beauty, and that is a foretaste of being in the eternal kingdom of God, in the new heaven and the new earth. So that's the first thing that beauty can do in the time of a crisis, because a sacred space is a space you go to in crisis. You go to weep, you go to pray, and this wall has become performative because I know that spontaneously people put prayers in the cracks between the pieces, much like the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. So it's a participatory. The second thing that beauty does, and I shall speed up, is beauty both convicts and gives you hope. When you see something beautiful, you stop dead in your tracks and you think, oh boy, I am not beautiful like this is beautiful. And the world is not beautiful like this is beautiful. And I need to do something about myself, and I need to do what I can do about the world. Beauty has that power. At the same time, beauty gives hope, because the very fact that there is something beautiful means that there is something that can be done. It means that transformation is possible. It means that the beautiful is possible and is itself a window of hope. And I'm sure Jasmine will talk about that in the African American experience, where beauty was and continues to be created out of great pain and suffering. And a final thing is that beauty creates community, in that, first of all, usually places like this place are collaborative. Yes, Peter Brandes designed the stained glass, and Maya designed the wall and the colors, but they couldn't make them all by themselves. And Peter was insistent that his Danish stained glass cutter person work with him and come over here to help him put them in. But I also know that Brian Shook and probably others in this room participated in the installation. And so it brought the beauty that we experience right here, brought a lot of people together, and they participated in creating it. So there's that. Another aspect is one that I see every time we go to Hawaii, which is where I go to escape, and Howard goes along because he can paddleboard. He calls it a rock in the middle of a bunch of water, and I call it heaven on earth. Anyway, but every evening people gather at the beach to watch the sunset because it's beautiful. And nobody has to say anything. It's just that, 50, 60, 70, 100 people come together and share that experience of looking at that beauty and that glory. I'm not even sure that they could say why, other than who wants to miss the sunset? And the reason is because it's beautiful. And it brings people together, which is a point that Elaine Scarry made in her now 20-plus-year-old book on beauty and being just, that beauty such as the sunset is just in that it belongs to everyone. Nature belongs to everyone. Flowers belong to everyone. It cuts across race, class, and gender. It's something for absolutely everyone. And in that sense, it brings us together. So I think that's about all I need to say on the subject.
That was wonderful. Thank you. We will get back to a lot of those themes, I think, in the coming minutes here. Next, I would like to introduce Alistair Gordon, who is joining us from. Are you in London right now, Ali?
I'm sitting in my studio in South London right now.
Fantastic.
Love that studio.
I guess, again, appropriately, he was unable to join us in person due to travel restrictions with COVID, but we are really, really happy to have him here and even get a little glimpse into the studio. Alistair is a London-based artist, author, tutor, and co-founder of Morphe Arts, a mentoring charity for recent art graduates. He lectures at the Leith School of Art in Edinburgh, and his recently published book, Why Art Matters, offers an insightful voice through which this art form is partially framed. He is a painter whose work has been featured in various public, corporate, private collections. A current solo exhibition of his fascinating Trompe-l'oeil paintings, is currently being shown at Aleph Contemporary in London, and was recently given some accolades, as I understand, one of the best shows to see in London right now. And his work has recently been featured via the Cynthia Corbett Gallery at the London Art Fair, the Scope Art Fair in New York. He was also awarded the inaugural Shoesmiths Prize and has been shortlisted for various other awards, including the Denton's Art Prize and Jackson's Painting Prize. So please join me in welcoming Alistair Gordon.
Thank you, Luke, very much. Thank you for the introduction. And hi, Luke, John, Roberta, Jasmine. Hi, everybody. Very nice to be here with you as a disembodied head floating above a platform. So why beauty matters in times of crisis? Well, here in the UK, we've experienced 3 lockdowns in the last 18 months. And somewhere in between the first and the second lockdown, my wife and I managed to escape and we got out to a dinner party. And at the dinner party, we were talking about the pandemic. We were talking about the problems related to COVID. And one of our fellow guests, who is a curator, asked this really interesting question, a difficult question. She said, people are losing their jobs, they're losing their homes, they're losing their lives. With so much evil in the world right now, why does art even matter? It was a shocking question, and it relates to our question for today. Not just why does art matter, but also why does beauty matter in times of crisis? Indeed, if we see beauty and art as a means to articulate beauty. Can a beautiful painting find an ultimate cure for the coronavirus? Can a beautiful sculpture or a flower or a sunset stop an oppressive regime from occupying another country? Can a beautiful work of art stop an invading tank? If we are to think of beauty merely in terms of a utilitarian or simply pragmatic function, then of course the answer is no. When art, music, nature are valued only by what they do rather than what they are, when beauty is reduced to utility, we might be forgiven for thinking that it serves no value whatsoever in a broken society, other than to gild the cracks of oppression or to play sweet music while the Titanic sinks, so to speak. Yet, let's argue that both a biblical account and the evidence of human history tells us otherwise. When my friend asked that question at the dinner party, why does art matter in times of crisis? My response to that was immediate. Art matters and beauty matters because people matter. Art is the voice of the human spirit, and humans are made with dignity in the image of God. Art gives a voice to people who can't be heard. It shapes the way we see the world and one another. Art matters because a beautiful painting or a sculpture can transform us in a way that nothing else can. It's not just that beautiful art can brighten our spirits, which of course it can, but a truly beautiful work of art can excite and insight, it can provoke, it can soothe, it can inspire, it can unsettle. We live a long way downstream from a time when beauty was regarded in a synonymous relationship with our ancient sisters of goodness and truth and justice. But we do very well to remind ourselves of that ancient reality. You know, human concepts of beauty have, of course, changed through the years. And in a classical sense, beauty involved a harmonious assembly of shape and form. In a Dionysian tradition, it was more about the lavish abandonment and the glorious negation of rules. Today, some might say that beauty is a social construct or a human invention to either describe the finer things in life or to serve somehow as a conduit for power. And in such a medley of meaning, you know, how does one even begin to categorize beauty? We might not even reach a consensus this afternoon on a definition of beauty, any more than we can find a definition for other such volatile terms. But we can reach a consensus on the importance of beauty and its place in our lives, and all the more in times of crisis. So I'm a Christian. I came to Christ as an art student in Glasgow, and it changed everything, and it changed the way I paint. And for me now, I take my personal cue from the Bible. As you'll know, the Bible has several words for beauty. One of them is nawa, which means lovely. And the prophet Isaiah says, how lovely on the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news. In Song of Solomon, the teacher says to his lover, your cheeks are lovely with ornaments, your neck with chains of gold. I've been married 18 years now. I've yet to say that to my wife. I'm not quite sure how she'd respond if I talk about her neck as chains of gold. But here beauty is related to a desirable person or an object. It's a beautiful ornament, a lover, even a landscape. There's another term for beauty in the Bible, and it's the Hebrew word tob, which means good or true. And in a way, it wins the beauty contest because we see it 562 times in the Bible. It crops up in 1 Samuel when we read about the future King Saul. We're told that he was very good and true. Later, the prophetess Esther was known all over the land for her beauty. But the word is good and true. It wasn't just the way that she looked. It was also about her character, her goodness. It features in that verse I read a moment ago from Isaiah, but this time it takes a rather surprising form. How lovely on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news. And then Isaiah goes on to say, who bring tidings of goodness, who proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, your God reigns. As an artist, I'm curious when the Bible talks about beauty. It most commonly equates it with goodness. And that moves beauty beyond the way things look to a deeper, more resonant understanding of beauty. When we talk about things that are beautiful, you know, I think we generally agree that we're talking about things that we agree are good, which might help us see the difference between things of surface with beauty and things of personal taste, and things that take a deeper understanding of beauty, indeed things that resonate in eternity. And here, it's possible for something to be both beautiful and ugly. Even ugly things can be part of this harmony in the world. And Luke, in your introduction, you talked about Tolkien, and in the Silmarillion, the angelic being Melkor introduces a discord, a disharmony in the world, but yet the divine being uses that discord and creates something beautiful from it. You know, even ugly things can be part of the harmony in the world. Umberto Eco points to this in his book On Beauty, where he writes that beauty springs from the contrast of opposites, and thus even monsters have a reason and dignity in the concept of creation. And then he says something even more controversial. alongside evil, good shines out all the better. Now, I recognize that's problematic, and to say that beauty requires evil or ugly in order to be understood as beautiful is problematic at best. Yet in the Bible, beauty isn't connected merely with goodness and truth. It's also to do with justice. It's to do with justice. And when we read about justice, God's justice on the cross, we sing about a beautiful Savior. Even more, and most importantly, biblical beauty isn't something to observe from the outside. It's something that we are invited into to experience on the inside, specifically inside the presence of God. All human beings are invited into the beauty of God, and this is our refuge, our dwelling for eternity. Why does beauty matter in times of crisis? Beauty matters because it reminds us of our eternal reality and our invitation into the very presence of Yahweh. And just before I wrap up my little bit, I'd like you to imagine something with me. Imagine with me a little stream of clear, crisp water. Imagining following that stream down to where it meets a wide, slow flowing river. Imagine this river. This is the Seine in the heart of France. And we're following it downstream to a little town called Giverny. And here in Giverny, you might stumble across the home of the post-impressionist painter, Claude Monet. His garden was and still is rather remarkable. He spent his final 30 years developing it from around 1883 and onwards, and to Monet, gardening was a great passion as much as painting. If you visit it today, you can have a lot of fun. You can spot his favorite things to paint. You can see the lily pond and the blue bridge, and they've been lovingly recreated to echo his paintings. When I visited a few years ago, what struck me most about his home is how every room in the house has been carefully designed to make the most of the light. Every one with a view to the garden and decorated with just the right colour. The kitchen, painted in lemon yellow and crammed full with Japanese wood prints and etchings. The whole effect is utterly absorbing, consuming and beautiful. And in a way, it reminded me of what it might be like to enter fully into the presence and home of God in a very real and beautiful way. Now, imagine in 1914, the tranquility of that garden interrupted by the sound of warplanes overhead and fighting close by. Indeed, it was during the First World War, in the last decade of his life, with the threat of violence around him, that Monet painted his largest canvases in that garden in Giverny. The paintings titled Les Grandes Décorations, commonly known as the water lily paintings. And Monet was acutely aware of the war, that the peace of his garden often being shattered by the sound of gunfire from the battlefields, only 50 kilometers away. His stepson was fighting on the front, and his own son Michel was called up in 1915. Indeed, many of the inhabitants of Giverny fled to safety, but Monet stayed. And as he stayed, he said, "If those savages must kill me," he said, "it will be in the middle of my canvases, in front of my life's work." You see, painting, making beauty, was what he did. And he saw it in a way as his patriotic contribution. Like many artists, Monet didn't see beauty as surface decoration. For him, painting, beauty, was an act of resistance. And his beautiful resistance was a group of paintings of the weeping willows, a traditional symbol in Western painting for mourning. And this was Monet's most immediate response to the war, the tree's long, sweeping branches hanging over the water, an eloquent expression of grief and loss. Monet's not alone in his artistic resistance in times of crisis. We might think of Picasso's Guernica, Frida Kahlo, her allegorical paintings, the architecture of Christopher Wren, the abstract works of Kazimir Malevich, who lived through and experienced the First World War and the October Revolution firsthand and was imprisoned for his works of abstract painting. Beauty matters in times of crisis, not just because it lifts our spirits to better things, not just because it reminds us of the things that really matter, of goodness and truth and justice. Beauty matters not just because it reminds us of our eternal purpose to enter into the presence of God and enjoy Him forever. But beauty also matters because it's an act of resistance. It abides with us through the storm. It is the storm. It's the light, the candle through the night watch. It punches holes in the darkness. Beauty matters because humans matter, and wherever there are human beings, there must always be really great beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. That was wonderful, and thank you for bringing us back to France in a more beautiful way. So much in this. Yeah, I'm slightly speechless. We will move on and hopefully again revisit a lot of these topics, and then so much overlap to explore here. We will move on to Jasmine McNeil, who is the curator of contemporary Black art at Bridge Projects in Los Angeles and an independent curator. She's the founder of Other Faith Art Consulting, which is an art advisory which focuses on inclusivity and representation of Black contemporary art. They promote and represent Black and Indigenous artists, curators, collectors in the art world through art advisory, curatorial exhibitions, gallery representation, and in general making the art world and artwork more accessible to the Black community. Her curatorial project, Otherwise Revival, which is a sprawling and powerful group exhibition recently co-curated for Bridge Projects in Los Angeles, along with Kara Lewis, focuses on the Black spiritual experience in America. In a very glowing review published in the influential Hyperallergic, critic Alison Connor wrote of the show, little quote here, Otherwise Revival gathers 31 artists whose work tremble with references to the histories and personal experiences of Black spiritualities. From the Black Pentecostal Church to Catholicism to a synergetic mix of beliefs, the show explores the breadth of Black praise and worship. Although most of the work was made in the past year, I was awed by the overwhelming sense of history, how the exhibition traces the contours of Black spiritual thought from Louisiana plantations to Azusa Street to our present moment. So please welcome me or join me in welcoming Jasmine McNeil.
Thank you so much, everybody, for having me today. Thank you for being here. Today, I did a talk earlier about the beauty of Blackness in the midst of crisis. And I was thinking a lot about my own journey and how I, came to this point. And I grew up in a Baptist background where there was a lot of praise and prayer. And it was very frightening for me as a young child to experience what it looked like for people who were older than me and more experienced in understanding spirit, what it looked like when they showed that in their body and in their praise. And so I went away from the church for a long time, and what I'm realizing now is that it taught me how to find spirit within myself and in my background and in my body. And something that I learned is how spirit is forever within us. And for me specifically in the Black community, how it is passed down generational to our children and our practice. And so in places like the Black church, where expression and praise are hand in hand with reading the Bible and understanding God, I start to really look at Black art and see how it's transformed not only the representation of the Black community, but how it's transforming understanding what spirit is. So when I went to UCLA, I figured out that I wanted to be a curator. I knew that that's exactly what I wanted, and I went for it. And as I started to explore, I started to notice that there were not a lot of other curators that looked like me. It was very hard for me to place myself and to not feel so alone. So I did my master's in Belgium, and I felt even more alone. And not even that, but I also started to discover that there were so many histories of art in different countries and communities, but the consistent history that was left out was Black history. It felt like Black people did not exist in this long period of what art was. And so I did everything in my power to try to find out where were my people, because I know that we existed in this period. And so what I started to discover were there were all these really beautiful, grand European paintings painted by old masters and my ancestors, and there were Black people there, but they were servants. They didn't have names, they didn't have identification, they were subjects. And through my reading and my research, I started to understand that these people of mine were only there for the support of representing someone else, highlighting whiteness not only physically in the painting and in these, representational forms of art, but also in their bodies and in who they were. And so I started realizing that the art history was not only excluding Black history on purpose, but because the history wasn't ours. And so I started really diving deeper into what Black art is and why it's important. And I realized that the spirit lives within us. All of the torture and attempt at erasure leaves this deep sorrow that lives and is passed down generationally. But I believe, especially here today, as to why beauty matters is because in the Black community, there is nothing else to do but to have beauty and but to create in the midst of crisis and in the midst of sadness and turmoil. And I think a lot about blues and how I can be taken away by a blues song instantly. And I can trace every tone and this deep hum that comes from this inner belly of the music that I hear. And you listen to someone like Mahalia Jackson with this just this deep song and this deep sorrow. And it comes from these slave songs. And being able to burst into song at the lowest point of your day and the lowest point of your life. And I think about that when I'm feeling sad, when I want to feel something, what I put on are slave songs. And sometimes I'm like, this a little, am I a masochist? What's going on here? But what I realize is that it's the generational wealth that's coming out of me and asking me to ask these questions about what beauty is for my community and for my people. And so what I think Black art is now is the physical representation of defying human error. I think that this country has had a long history in purposefully trying to deny their human error of what they've done and what they continue to do to Black people. But what Black art does is shine a light fully on it, and to let the world know that the representation of art and Black art will no longer be in the hands of others, but that we are here to reclaim it and reclaim our history and make sure that we are seen, so in the future there will never be a question about whether we were here or not. And so my work and the wonderful opportunity that I had to co-curate Otherwise Revival was a true blessing. And one of the things that I will always take with me is learning about William J. Seymour and the Pentecostal movement. It happened in 1906, on April 9th, 1906, on Bonnie Bray Street in downtown. You can still go and visit the site. And what happened there was a miracle. It started by William J. Seymour, and he was a sharecropper from Louisiana and got called on by God to spread this word after being told no 1,000,000 times and denied because people didn't think that it was true. And so on Bonnie Bray Street on this day, people from all backgrounds, creeds, economic classes came, and they were able to receive spirit. But that only happened because of the surrender to these people to be open to receiving, and more importantly, open to William J. Seymour, his surrender, to be able to take on this calling by God that didn't have anything to do with human acceptance, but only from source and from spirit. And what really takes me over is that to this day, people come from all over the world to feel the miracles of this place. And so for me, it's a testament that these buildings that we build and that we put all of our effort into, it comes from us and the spirit and the intention that we put into them. Because when we're gone and when the buildings are gone, what do we take with us? We take our spirit, we take our faith, we take our intention. And so it's really important for us to understand that these spaces are so wonderful, and it's so great that we have them to hold space for us, but they would be nothing without the intention of God and the Spirit of God that comes through us if we allow it to. Surrender can be negative, but it can also be so powerful if we let our guards down to be able to receive and listen and spread the word, just like William J. Seymour did that day, and enabled all of us to be able to witness this miracle and continue to witness this miracle. So Black art, for me, is why beauty matters in the time of crisis. We are going to probably be in crisis for a very long time, as long as the structures are in place or at B, but there's nothing to do sometimes but to create beauty and to have beauty and to choose ease, to choose love, to choose abundance, to choose goodness versus anything else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I feel like one of the things we will definitely be returning to is that sense of embodiment and place, and how we make sense of those things in relationship to beauty and in history and generations. Well, finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Jonathan Anderson. He is an artist, art critic, and theologian. In addition to his studio art practice, his research and writing focuses on modern and contemporary art with a particular interest in exploring its relationships to religion and theology. He is the co-author with William Dernis of the book Modern Art and the Life of the Culture, Religious Impulses of Modernism. He's a postdoctoral associate at Duke University and recently defended his PhD dissertation entitled The Invisibility of Theology in Contemporary Art at King's College in London, very recently. He also served for many years as a beloved professor of art here at Biola, and we are very happy to welcome him back.
Well, thanks, Luke, and thanks, everyone. It really is wonderful to be here. I have such great affection for this place and for these people, so these people, you. So it's wonderful to be here. I just want to say a few things, and I think I'll try to keep my comments relatively short for the sake of conversation, but maybe say a couple of things that I hope will really add into the things that were already said, and maybe draw out one particular element that was really strong in what the rest of you said. I won't define beauty. I have the sense that beauty is a lot like Augustine talking about time, where he says, I know exactly what it is until someone asks me about it. And then once I try to get into defining and explaining, it slips away. I don't know what it is. And I think that's right with beauty, but it's strong in us. So I think beauty matters in times of crisis because beauty is fundamentally a matter of human affection and attachments and loves. And it has an enormous amount to do with how we're attuned to the world and how our loves are organized for better or worse. And what's at stake in our experiences of beauty are whole constellations of very deep cares and concerns, allegiances, repulsions as well. Again, whether these are just or unjust, healthy or unhealthy. And crises are times when maybe quite extended times, maybe quite acute times, when our organization of loves are thrown into question and get scrambled and get reevaluated and are put under pressure. And so I want to draw that piece out a bit more. I suppose in short, I think that beauty is a matter of attunement to the world. And in moments of crisis, or not in moments of crisis, we have the opportunity to examine our loves and to grow our loves, our affections for the world and for others, which is deeply important. In this manner, I think beauty is deeply important for those who are concerned with love of God and love of neighbor and love of world. At the heart of beauty is a responsive relationality. I don't think that beauty is a characteristic or an aspect that is built into things. It is relational. Beauty, and the experience of beauty is one of a perception of relations between things, whether those are formal relations or social relations or temporal relations and so on. And beauty is always experienced and perceived within dense networks of all of those relations. And we are part of that. Beauty is a responsive. It takes place only in responsive ways, I think. Responsive relationality. If I were to describe it kind of phenomenologically, which I'll do briefly, I think beauty, the experience of beauty, is one of the world or some aspect of the world eliciting a deep yes from us. Yes. To this thing just the way that it is. And that yes is one that becomes filled with affection for whatever it is that elicits this yes. A care for it just the way that it is. A love for it. And this yes is deeply dangerous and deeply good, deeply necessary. And so I think there are two parts of this, and I'll keep this brief, but two parts of this. Perceptions of beauty have something to do with the way that the world is. I think we all feel that. We find the world beautiful, people beautiful, details beautiful, narratives beautiful. There's something about the way the world is. And so there's a certain kind of force of the world that is experienced in beauty, a thisness, a particular configuration of how things are put together. As Simone Weil said, the beauty of the world is the order of the world that is loved. And I think that's a concise statement for what I'm on about. The beauty of the world is the order of the world that is loved, or some small order, perhaps, part of an order. So to find the world beautiful and other people beautiful is to perceive in them something good, something valuable, something that fits, some arrangement of being here that matters in a deep way. So it is something about the way the world is, but in another sense, perceptions of beauty have to do with the way the world is received. A person, I think, must learn to perceive and feel things as beautiful. Beauty requires attunement to the way the world is. This includes certainly the structure of our bodies and minds, that, one needs eyes to see and ears to hear, so to speak. And these the structure of our bodies and minds are particularly structured, and they're limited in that way. So the human eye sees a very, very narrow portion of the light spectrum, and we are cognitively structured to receive those wavelengths in very particular ways. Red, blue is a miracle in this way. The reception of whatever the world is so that it is blue is a miracle, I think. And further, to then consolidate all of this sensory input from the world into a world of form and space and movement. This requires reception, whether we're mostly not conscious of it, but one has to learn to organize and receive the world in this way. But further, it requires attentiveness, and we're all quite aware of this. Attunement to the world is passive in some sense, but it's also intensely and utterly active. One reaches toward the world in attention. Attention is creative in that sense. Things become beautiful through attention. I think beauty demands attention. And things become potentially more beautiful with the investment of attention and attentiveness. Beauty also requires understanding. We all know people who are lovers of things find extraordinary, and who understand some aspect of the world, find extraordinary beauty in it. Learning to paint observationally developed in me a profound love of color, all color. The color relationships everywhere just become profoundly beautiful. Learning music has taught me to love sound as sound. Walking over here, there was a plane flying overhead, like a small plane. And it is just, music has taught me that a plane flying overhead, especially one of those small ones, is the most elaborate musical instrument. It is just way over the top. And it is wonderful as such. Music, John Cage taught me this. Music opens up the world of sound as intensely beautiful. Botany teaches one to love plants, and so on and so forth. And all of this, these modes of understanding are intensely social and historical, and that is an aspect of all beauty. It is always embedded in social and historical processes and structures, again, for better or worse, better and worse. So I think just to end, I see the question of beauty in times of crisis as is very much linked to the processes of affection that we have for the world, our loves of the world, our loves of others. And again, this makes beauty deeply dangerous because there are all sorts of false, fraudulent, degrading, abusive affections for the world that are at play and at stake in beauty, our practices of beauty, our perceptions of beauty, our norms of beauty, and so on. But it also attunes us to a love of what is most precious and most good and most vital in the world and in others. And I think this is one of the ways that the arts are very important as a site where we experiment with and work through the implications, for better or worse, of our practices of beauty and our perceptions of beauty. And I think that's one of the reasons that art and beauty are important in times of crisis and in times of peace and repose as well. Okay, I'll end with that. Thanks.
Thank you, John, and thank you all so much. We are going to take a short break here so that everybody can breathe a little bit, use the restrooms if you need to. For the sake of trying to squeeze in a pretty healthy conversation or discussion here before we end at 6, we'll try to do this in roughly 10 minutes or so. But we'll begin or restart our conversation here at 5:30. Also, if there are any students in the room and you're looking for a QR code, those are going to be posted after the break. So see you all here again in about 10 minutes. Well, in our remaining 23 minutes or so, made some big promises today, so given a few delays, I don't know if we can fully solve the problem of beauty in the world. But I think we've made some really good progress so far. And I wanted to, we should acknowledge that Ali is 8 hours ahead, so we're getting close to 2 a.m. On his end.
When the going gets tough, the Scots get going.
I wanted to start actually with a word that Jasmine used, which was surrender, and surrendering as a term and in context was discussed as a way of making peace and accepting in the beauty that is there, and maybe in the way that Jonathan was talking about it being relational and being about reception. But surrender can also mean a kind of giving up, and so it has these dual meanings even within this conversation that we're having of succumbing to a kind of loss as opposed to a kind of receiving of something good. And the story of Monet that Alistair shared felt kind of like both in one story, in a way, that here he is, sort of waiting for what might be the end, but waiting in a way that is just shrouded in beauty, the beauty that he's been cultivating for decades. So I guess the place I want to start there is how do we sort of put a framework around that kind of surrender, and how do we avoid the negative surrender in the favor of the good surrender, because there is this danger, which is another term that was used, like beauty as dangerous. When you open yourself up, you're also opening yourself up for the possibility of so much bad coming in with the good.
Well, Well, that makes me, the way you framed that makes me think of C.S. Lewis. He's got this little thin book on criticism. And in it he says that there is no way for an artwork to open itself to you unless you surrender to it. And there's no way for you to know whether it is worth surrendering to the artwork until you do it. So it is a structure built by someone else that you have to get inside in order for it to work. And it might collapse on you. It might hold up, but it is a we could say risk or leap of faith or something, or it is a gesture of trust or faith in another. It's not even about the faith in the artist, a faith that the world and the world of the arts is more deeply is rich enough and deep enough that the surrender will lead to something meaningful, or beautiful, or something that can be learned from, or something like that.
Well, it's, if the original sin is somehow wrapped up in our putting ourselves in the place of being God, where we are the law for ourselves, and we try to take back our dependence on God and be our own God unto ourselves. Beauty forces you, by what you were just saying, to step outside that royal self, if you will, that imperial self, and let go of that long enough to encounter something that's bigger and deeper and more than you are. And by entering into it, you let go of some of that power that you wanted to just attribute to yourself. You're letting go of that to go somewhere else. Like looking at this piece of art. And when people are drawn to put messages in it, all of that, and that's why the Eastern people call it performative, in that the object draws you into itself, and that being drawn into the object is also drawing you out of yourself and toward God.
Yeah, to sort of piggyback, I think that faith and not knowing whether the surrender is good or whether it's bad is also about uncomfortability, which is also a giving and like a sacrifice that you take. And faith itself is uncomfortable. And the more uncomfortable you are, I feel like the more God shows up, and spirit and presence. Yeah. And so there's uncomfortability in faith, and so I believe that allows, and intentionality is a part of it too. Just like spirit is intentional, the surrender for it to be good is also intentional. So intentionality and uncomfortability is usually the two components, I think, for me.
Well, that actually reminds me a little bit of something that Ali said also, that was about, not so much discomfort, but ugliness as sort of something that throws beauty in sharp relief. And that feels like another one of those points that's like kind of dangerous or slippery in a way, is what is that line between the kind of discomfort that faith, a leap of faith or an act of faith or an act of surrender gives, versus the, if we're talking about crisis, the actual tragedy or the actual evil in the world that induces this need for discomfort. And so in that sense, also I wanted to go to Ali, because one of the things that you sort of dropped in your conversation was beauty and truth and goodness which is this sort of historical construction of what we sometimes call the transcendentals, but also included justice in there. And I was wondering if you could speak a little bit maybe about that, and then kind of how you see those interrelating to each other.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about the comments that others have made about the space that beauty inhabits for us, how our experience of beauty isn't always a safe space to be in. And the idea that beauty somehow is to anesthetize or to placate or somehow to make pleasant or pleasing things that are not pleasant or uncomfortable, it just doesn't seem to resonate in our experience of beauty. You know, Roberta mentioned the sunset, of course, and when one encounters a sunset, I don't think there's really any culture in the world that doesn't describe a sunset in beautiful terms. And when one experiences the sunset, in one way, it just holds you. You know, you don't have to do anything about it. It's just to experience that moment of intense beauty. But it can hold you in so much as to create a space to allow for the imagination to develop, for an idea to form and shape, for a concern to unravel in some way. And when I think about how beauty relates to the nature of justice and injustice, how a beautiful work of art or a beautiful song or poem can create that space that can allow you just to be held for that moment, to say, actually, this isn't good and this isn't right, and you need to do something about this, or we need to do something about this. And it moves away from the idea that beauty has to somehow placate or cover over the cracks with gilding. But beauty can actually, it can really get under your skin, and it can make you feel anxious and nervous and push you to entertain a thought that you hadn't thought of before. So there's something in there that helps us, I think, to understand how beauty can explore issues of justice in a way that perhaps other experiences or forms of attunement might struggle to do so.
Because it exposes the ordering of your affections. Yeah. And
Indeed.
that exposure has an ethic to it, has an ethics, a justice and injustice. But I think it is the beauty that draws out of us the yeses and nos, beauty and ugliness. I mean, I think those really are linked together in the kinds of judgments we're making in beauty or ugliness.
It's making me think of Jonathan Edwards. Some years ago, Howard said, you have to read Jonathan Edwards. So I said, okay, I'm an obedient wife. Remember that, Howard? He'll talk about that later. Anyway, but he was right, as he usually is, which he would also say. But Jonathan Edwards says it's called religious affections, and which is an old word that had a deeper meaning than it does in our contemporary discourse. But he says, in order to love God, we must first see his loveliness. And it's a loveliness that is that combination of the good, the true, the just, and the beautiful. And there's I think it's in Psalms that, that I want to love, to dwell in God's temple and contemplate his beauty forever, in some translations. And there's a group of theologians, Hans Boersma leaps to my mind, who want to emphasize that, what heaven will be is just the beatific vision. And it's kind of a reaction to a kind of heaven is, to a focus on the horizontal, to refocus on the vertical as to what eternity will be. I think it's going to be more than just the beatific vision, but I think we will be in a place that is beautiful, but will be like more alive than we can even imagine, that will be invigorated. But but that psalm together with Edwards is something that I don't think the church has thought about very deeply for a while. And I think we need to think about it more deeply, to deeply contemplate God's loveliness, his beauty, and then the theme of the Old Testament, of course, is you become what you worship. So if you worship this being who is all loveliness, all beauty, all justice, then we become more and more like him as we contemplate him.
I was thinking earlier, and is linked to this, as Jasmine was talking before the break about blues and spirituals, I started thinking about James Cone, famous black theologian James Cone, has this great book on the spirituals and the blues. And in it, I can't remember exactly how he puts it, but he says that one of the central things that's at stake in the both the spirituals and the blues, especially the blues, is an affirmation of somebodyness. That it is a vocalization in a kind of expanding way of somebodyness. Not just of somebody, but there's a one there. There's a one who loves and cares and hurts and so on.
And isn't just an object.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's a person. It's a somebody.
And that seems relevant to this discussion of justice, beauty, ugliness. Some of what the whole point of the blues to some extent is to vocalize the blues, the injustice and what is horrifically ugly in a society or in one's life, but does it in a way that emphasizes the beauty of the somebodyness at the center of it.
No, absolutely. That's a really beautiful point. And with that is like a reclaim of self, but also at the same time, a destruction of ego. Like that's like what I hear in the blues. Like it's reclaiming self. It's saying the name. It's saying like this moment of sorrow and pain, but like all at the same time, I feel like you have to be at your lowest point with no association with your ego to even sing so deeply and feel so deeply. And it's the same thing with the spirituals and the slave songs. Like there's a removal of self almost because there's no attachment to what it is. It's reclaiming and a removal at the same time. It's very interesting. It's like an in-between. I always think about, what's his name? He was like the legend of him. He was a blues singer, and he was like supposed to be in the Crossroads. I can't remember his name right now, but the legend of like
Robert Johnson?
Yes, Robert Johnson. But even hearing Robert Johnson, there's like this like eerie, very like ethereal sound. It's a little creepy. But for me, it's that same thing. Like he removed a piece of himself, but also claimed it at the same time so much that these legends came that he wasn't human and that he was of someone of both sides. And sometimes I think that that's where spirit is also. If we can remove ourselves enough and put ourselves back, we find this really common ground of what beauty can be. And it's not something that we can vocalize all the time.
You can see it when you see performances of a lot of jazz blues performers. I'm thinking of John Coltrane in A Love Supreme. He's there, but he's not there. You know, I mean, he's beyond. I don't know how else to put it.
And influenced by the gospel.
Yeah, deeply. Yeah.
And in that sense, that idea of surrender comes full circle, right? That there is this simultaneously a letting go of self and a loss of ego, but also in that moment there is this profound reclamation of self, or like one's identity is restored in that beauty, or ultimately in that truth and goodness and in God.
Well, it's the Christian concept. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. And also that you become more yourself when you give yourself to Christ, which sounds like, it's a contradiction. It's certainly a paradox, but it's true. And Chesterton said, how alike are all the tyrants, but how different are the saints. Because they have, just think about it. From Teresa of Avila, who she is, to Augustine, they're very different. Whereas Hitler and Stalin have a heck of a lot in common. If you think about it. Anyway, and that was his point.
And even there's if we go back to even how these ideas were linked together originally, like beauty, truth, goodness, and we can put justice in the same category. There are things that are the things that are past our ability to explain them. Kind of, Jonathan, how you were describing this, like you know it when you see it, but the reason they're considered transcendental is that they are, to define them is almost a tautological exercise. Like you know goodness because it's good, and you know beauty when you experience beauty. Justice is something that is built into the human psyche, into our souls, but we can't explain it beyond that. Like we feel injustice from I have young children. They knew immediately when things weren't fair. We know when something is wrong or someone has been wrong. Excuse me, has been wronged. So the sort of medieval mystics were often saying, like, essentially this is not a proof of God, but this is where we find God. This is that space in between, and maybe that space that you're describing as Robert Johnson, like he's on both sides because we don't know how to explain what is past this point. This is the limit. This is the limit of human ability to perceive and comprehend.
Well, on the topic of mysticism, just this comes to mind. I mean, one of the problems with a kind of the way that Plato is often taught is that the transcendentals, goodness, truth, and beauty, are these sort of eternal forms, and the world around us is a shadowy play that is separated from these transcendentals, right? I think Christian Neoplatonism really corrects that in a lot of ways, in which what's at stake in the transcendentals is that the world is not a kind of shadowy play of what is transcendent, or what is the real, but is the real itself, and that the light of God illumines all things that are, that have being. So being is this sort of radiating or shining through of that which is good and true and beautiful. And it is the surface of the world where the real happens, rather than a kind of shadow play. And I think that's really important for anytime like the transcendentals come up in a discussion about beauty, like, red flags go up because we're still thinking a kind of sophomore level class on Plato rather than the Christian mystics, which I think put the thing the other way around.
Well, it's the incarnation.
Yeah, right.
And the universe is the incarnation of God's love and of who everything God is. He incarnates in the creation, which is why I like to look at pictures of space, because it's so beautiful. They're always drop dead gorgeous. You just, I've got books of them, and I even subscribe on Instagram to NASA Pictures Daily, just in case you forget about the universe, And beauty itself was incarnate in Jesus Christ. And beauty and truth and justice was incarnate And God is somehow, material things are connected to the spiritual. And I think you're right, that it was the Christian Neoplatonists that said, no, it's not just up here somewhere. It's incarnated around us. And we are to become incarnators of it in our work and in our own creation after the Creator.
Just maybe as a, Ali,
I was just going to say,
How you doing, Ali?
that,
Are you awake?
I'm still here. We're over 2 o'clock in the morning here, and I'm still with it, pumping myself full of coffee. Our experiences of beauty, of course, happen in a multisensory way. You know, we've talked a lot about art this afternoon, but also one thinks about beautiful things that we hear, that we taste, that we smell, a beautiful meal. And I love that description that C.S. Lewis has of the new creation, of just being so much more weighty and fuller and more embodied in a multiple sensory way than what we currently experience within this reality. And I wonder if that helps us then to think about beauty as something not just within the transcendent realm, but something utterly embodied, you know, in the muck of this world, things that we sense in every way inside of our bodies. Here in London, I have a garden in my studio, and I'm with Monet on this one. I think gardening is an equally wonderful endeavor to art, and I'm growing the color red in my garden. I'm growing madder rose at the moment, and you need to cultivate it very slowly over 2 years to get to the point where it can make that really beautiful, intense pinky red pigment. And it reminds me that when making a painting, I'm working with things that are material or made of carbon and atoms and stuff in the world. It's physical stuff. I don't paint ideas across a canvas or philosophy. It's things of the world, like Adam, the first human, whose name means earth, but it also means red in some Hebrewic traditions. You know, names and people and materials and art all are connected within God's creation, it seems. And so to describe beauty in embodied terms seems to make a lot of sense.
Yes, Lewis said, God loves matter, he invented it.
And that might be the way that we close this out, in the sense that well, let's enjoy our embodiment here in this place. Thank you all, and I think we talked not as directly or as long as we wanted to about space and about place and about embodiment and experience, but ultimately a beautiful community and the goodness of that is one of the most profound ways that we experience this in a relational way. So thank you for being a part of this and for creating this beauty here with us today.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, Luke.
Discover who you're called to be at Biola University, a leading Christ-centered university in Los Angeles, with programs on campus and online. Subscribe for more of our videos and learn more at biola.edu.